Chameleons are one of the coolest animals on the planet. I mean, they change color, their eyes move independently, they catch bugs with a tongue that shoots out faster than a fighter jet launches off an aircraft carrier. So when people see one at a pet store or a reptile expo and think, I need one of those in my life, I totally get it. I really do. But here's the thing. I'm about to give you 7 brutally honest reasons why you should probably not get a chameleon. And I say this as someone who genuinely loves these animals. This isn't a hate video. This is a save yourself years of frustration, hundreds or even thousands of dollars, and possibly save a chameleon's life video. Because the #1 killer of pet chameleons isn't disease. It isn't predators. It's well-meaning owners who had no idea what they were signing up for. So stick with me, because by the end of this, you're either going to thank me for talking you out of it, or you're going to be one of the rare people who says, you know what, I'm still in, and now I actually know what I'm getting into. Either way, you win. Let's start with the big one, and honestly, this alone is enough to make most people reconsider. Chameleons are extremely expensive to keep properly, and I'm not talking about the cost of the animal itself. You can pick up a veiled chameleon for $40 to $60 at a reptile expo. A panther chameleon, which is the one everyone wants because they look like tiny dinosaurs dipped in a rainbow, those will run you anywhere from $200 to over $500 depending on the locale. But here's where people get blindsided. The animal is the cheapest part of the entire equation. A proper chameleon enclosure is not a fish tank. It's not even a standard reptile terrarium. Chameleons need screen enclosures with significant vertical space because they're arboreal, meaning they live in trees and want to climb up, not crawl around on the floor. A quality adult enclosure is going to cost you somewhere around $150 to $250, and that's before you put a single thing inside it. Now you need a linear fluorescent UVB bulb, something like a T5HO that provides proper UVB gradient. That fixture and bulb together are another $50 to $80, and you have to replace that bulb every 6 months because the UVB output degrades, even though the bulb still turns on. Then you need a basking light, live plants because chameleons drink water off leaves, and they absolutely will not drink from a standing water dish the way most other reptiles will. You need a drip system and a misting system that coats the leaves in fine droplets several times a day. A quality automatic misting system, like a Mist King, is going to set you back about $100 to $150. You need drainage because all that water has to go somewhere, and if you don't figure out drainage, you end up with mold, bacteria, and a sick chameleon. You haven't even fed this animal yet, and you're already $600, $700, maybe $800 deep. Compare that to a leopard gecko setup at around $200 total, or a bearded dragon at maybe $300. A chameleon at minimum is double or triple that. And the ongoing costs are significant. Feeder insects are a recurring expense. Chameleons eat crickets, dubia roaches, hornworms, silkworms, and blue bottleflies, and they need variety. You're buying gut load for those feeders, calcium powder, multivitamin supplements, replacing bulbs, buying distilled or reverse osmosis water because tap water will clog your misting nozzles. You also need plain calcium without D3 for most feedings, calcium with D3 on a less frequent schedule, and a separate multivitamin supplement used sparingly. Getting the supplementation schedule wrong is one of the fastest ways to cause metabolic bone disease, which is exactly as awful as it sounds. Your chameleon's bones literally become soft and rubbery. Its jaw can't close properly. Its grip weakens. It falls from branches. It's painful, often fatal if not caught early, and treating it requires intensive veterinary intervention. And when your chameleon gets sick, you're looking at exotic vet specialists, not your regular dog and cat vet. An office visit alone can be $75 to $150, and treatment for something like metabolic bone disease or a respiratory infection can mean bills well over $1,000. If the idea of spending $800 before your chameleon even arrives, and then another $50 to $100 a month in ongoing costs, makes you uncomfortable, a chameleon is not for you right now, and there is zero shame in that. Now here's something that genuinely surprises a lot of first-time chameleon owners, and it's my second reason. Chameleons do not want to be your friend. I know that sounds harsh, but let me explain. We live in an era of social media where you see people handling their chameleons, letting them crawl on their heads, hand feeding them, and it looks like this magical bond between human and reptile. And while some chameleons can tolerate handling better than others, the reality is that chameleons are one of the most stress-prone reptiles you can keep. They're not like bearded dragons that will fall asleep on your chest. They're not like blue-tongued skinks that seem to genuinely enjoy being picked up. Chameleons, as a general rule, view you as a giant predator that happens to bring food. When a chameleon turns dark, puffs up, hisses, or gapes its mouth at you, it's not being dramatic, it's genuinely terrified. And chronic stress in chameleons doesn't just make them unhappy, it suppresses their immune system, which makes them vulnerable to infections, parasites, and disease. A study published in the Journal of Herpetological Medicine and Surgery noted that captive chameleons with elevated corticosterone levels, which is their primary stress hormone, showed significantly higher rates of upper respiratory infections and parasitic outbreaks. So every time you reach in and grab your chameleon for a photo op because your friend wants to see it, you might be literally taking days off its life. I knew a guy years ago who got a beautiful ambilobe panther chameleon, stunning animal, bright reds and blues. He would take it out every single day, put it on his shoulder, walk around the house, even took it outside a few times for photos. Within 4 months, that chameleon developed a respiratory infection, dark coloring all the time, wheezing, mucus around the nostrils. The vet straight up told him that the chronic handling was a major contributing factor. He thought he was bonding with it, when really he was making it sick. Can you build trust with a chameleon? Absolutely. Patient owners who use hand feeding, slow movements, and consistent routine can sometimes get their chameleon to walk voluntarily onto their hand, but this process takes weeks or months, not days. And some individual chameleons will simply never be comfortable with handling no matter what you do. You could do everything right, follow every piece of advice from every experienced keeper, and your particular chameleon might still hiss and puff every time your hand comes near the enclosure. That's not a failure on your part, that's just who that animal is. If your vision of owning a chameleon involves regularly holding it, showing it off to friends, or having it chill on your shoulder while you watch TV, you need to radically adjust that expectation. A chameleon is much more like having a living art installation that you observe and care for than a pet you interact with physically. And for a lot of people who are spending hundreds of dollars on an animal, the idea that they can mostly just look at it is a hard pill to swallow.
This connects directly to my third reason, and I think this is the one that catches people most off guard. The husbandry requirements for chameleons are unforgiving. With most popular pet reptiles, there's a margin for error. If your bearded dragon's basking spot is 5 degrees too warm, it'll move to the cool side. If you forget to mist your crested gecko one evening, it'll be fine until tomorrow. Chameleons don't give you that kind of grace. Humidity needs to fluctuate throughout the day, mimicking a natural cycle, higher in the morning, dropping during the day, and rising again in the evening. The temperature needs a specific gradient with a basking spot that's warm but not too hot, because chameleons overheat easily, and thermal burns are one of the most common injuries in captive chameleons. The UVB exposure needs to be at the right distance and the right intensity. The airflow needs to be adequate because stagnant air combined with high humidity is a recipe for respiratory infections, but too much airflow dries everything out. It's like trying to keep a dozen spinning plates in the air at once, except if one plate falls, your chameleon pays the price. And the really tricky part is that chameleons are masters at hiding illness. In the wild, a chameleon that looks sick gets eaten, so they've evolved to appear perfectly fine right up until they're critically ill. By the time most chameleon owners notice something is wrong, their chameleon has been sick for weeks, sometimes months. I once saw a post in an online chameleon community where someone shared photos of their chameleon that they thought was perfectly healthy. They were posting to show off a new plant they'd added to the enclosure, and within minutes, experienced keepers in the comments were pointing out that the chameleon's casque was slightly dehydrated. Its eyes looked a touch sunken, and the grip on the branch seemed weak. The owner had no idea. They'd been looking at that chameleon every day and missed what experienced eyes caught in a single photograph. That's how subtle the signs can be. Slight changes in color that persist, eyes that are closed during the day, sitting lower in the enclosure than usual, a slight curve in the casque or limbs suggesting early metabolic bone disease. These are things you have to train yourself to notice. If you're the kind of person who wants a relatively low-maintenance pet, please hear me when I say a chameleon is not that pet. Alright, reason number 4, and this is one that almost nobody talks about before they buy. Chameleons are solitary animals, and I mean aggressively solitary. You cannot keep 2 chameleons together, not 2 males, not 2 females, and definitely not a male and a female unless you're intentionally breeding and you know exactly what you're doing. This isn't like keeping a pair of crested geckos or a group of anoles. If 2 chameleons can see each other, they are stressed. If they're in the same enclosure, one or both of them will eventually become sick, stop eating, or in some cases, physically injure the other. Male chameleons are territorial and will fight, sometimes causing serious bite wounds and tail injuries. Females housed together will compete for resources and become chronically stressed, and even visual contact between enclosures can be a problem. If your 2 chameleons can see each other through the screen of their cages, you may need to put a visual barrier between them. I've seen keepers who thought it would be fun to get a pair and ended up with one chameleon that thrived and one that slowly wasted away because it was subordinate and living in constant fear. There was a post in one of the larger online chameleon communities where a new owner put 2 juvenile veiled chameleons together because the pet store told them it was fine. Within 3 weeks, one had stopped eating entirely and was showing stress coloring around the clock. The other had bite marks on its casque. That pet store employee either didn't know what they were talking about or didn't care, and those animals paid the price. So what does this mean practically? It means if you want 2 chameleons, you need 2 complete setups, 2 enclosures, 2 lighting systems, 2 misting systems, 2 drainage solutions in 2 separate areas of your home where they can't see each other. You just doubled everything I talked about in reason 1, and if you're thinking about breeding, that opens up a whole additional world of complexity, expense, and responsibility that goes way beyond the scope of this video. Just know that the cute idea of having a little chameleon family living together in a beautiful planted vivarium is pure fantasy. It would be a death sentence for at least one of those animals.
Reason number 5. Chameleons have significantly shorter lifespans than most people expect. When someone buys a ball python, that snake might live 30 years. A leopard gecko can live 20+ years with good care. Even a bearded dragon can make it 10 to 15 years. Chameleons? A male panther chameleon with excellent care is going to live 5 to 7 years. A veiled chameleon may be 5 to 8 years for a male. And here's the part that really gets people. Female chameleons of most species have even shorter lifespans. A female veiled chameleon might only live 3 to 5 years because the physiological toll of producing eggs, which they do whether they mate or not, is incredibly taxing on their bodies. Female panthers are similar, often living around 3 to 5 years with the best possible care. I've seen keepers who do everything right. Perfect enclosure, perfect humidity cycles, perfect supplementation, regular vet checkups, the whole 9 yards. And their chameleon still passes at 5 or 6 years old, not because of anything they did wrong, but because that's just the biological reality of these animals. Compare that to someone who gets a ball python at the same time. 25 years later, that snake is still going strong. For a lot of people, that emotional investment to time ratio just doesn't work. You should know going in that this isn't a decade-long companion. It's a few years, and those years require an enormous amount of effort and money compared to reptiles that could be with you for much, much longer. There's also the reality that many chameleons sold in pet stores are wild-caught or come from breeders who prioritize quantity over quality. Wild-caught chameleons often carry parasites and arrive stressed and dehydrated, and their lifespan in captivity is often tragically short, even with experienced keepers. Now, reason number 6, and this is one that hits people right in the middle of their first summer vacation after buying a chameleon. What do you do with a chameleon when you travel? With a dog, you drop it at a friend's house or a boarding facility. With a cat, you have someone come by once a day to fill the food and scoop the litter. With most reptiles, honestly, you can set up timers and leave them for a long weekend without too much worry. Chameleons? Not even close. Someone needs to mist that enclosure multiple times a day, or at least monitor the automatic misting system and refill the reservoir. Someone needs to feed live insects that have been properly gut-loaded and dust them with the correct supplement on the correct schedule, which changes depending on the day. Someone needs to check the temperature and humidity and make adjustments if the weather changes, because a hot day or a cold snap outside can throw everything inside the enclosure. Someone needs to observe the chameleon daily to watch for any early signs of illness, because as we've already established, by the time a problem is obvious, it's often an emergency. Finding a pet sitter who knows how to do all of that is incredibly difficult. Your neighbor who's happy to feed your cat, they're probably going to be overwhelmed by a chameleon care sheet that reads like a college syllabus. And good luck finding a boarding facility that accepts chameleons and actually knows how to care for them. They barely exist. Most reptile-savvy pet sitters charge a premium because they know the work involved. And even then, you're trusting someone else to maintain the precise conditions your chameleon needs to stay healthy. I know keepers who haven't taken a real vacation in years because they simply can't find anyone they trust with their chameleon. One keeper I follow online actually drives her chameleon setup to her parents' house, 2 hours away every time she travels, because her parents are the only people she trusts to follow the care routine. She literally packs up the entire enclosure, the lights, the misting system, the feeders, everything, loads it into her car, and reassembles it at her parents' place. That's the level of commitment we're talking about here. That's a lifestyle impact that most people don't think about when they're admiring those gorgeous colors at a reptile expo.
And finally, reason number 7, and this one is more about you than the chameleon. Most people who want a chameleon want it for the wrong reasons. The number one reason people want a chameleon is because they think the color changing is cool, and it absolutely is cool. But here's what most people don't know. Chameleons don't change color to match their surroundings like some kind of living mood ring camouflage device. That's one of the biggest myths in all of animal science. Chameleons change color primarily in response to temperature regulation, communication with other chameleons, and their emotional state, particularly stress and aggression. So that stunning bright green panther chameleon you saw in the photo online, it might look like that when it's healthy, warm, and feeling good, but when it's stressed, cold, or sick, which in a suboptimal setup can be a lot of the time, it's going to be dark and dull. I've seen so many first-time owners post in forums saying, "My chameleon looked amazing at the store, but now it's just brown all the time. What's wrong?" And the answer is usually that the animal is stressed, the husbandry isn't right, or both. The irony is that the very thing that attracted them to chameleons is the thing that's constantly showing them their chameleon isn't happy. And let me bust another myth while we're at it. Not all chameleons display those wild, vivid rainbow colors. Veiled chameleons, which are the most commonly sold species, are mostly green with some banding. They're beautiful in their own right, but if you're expecting the electric blues and fiery reds of an ambilobe panther chameleon, you're going to be disappointed if you bought a veiled because it was cheaper. That specific chameleon you saw on Instagram that made you want one, that animal might be a 1 in 100 example photographed under perfect lighting at peak display. Your chameleon probably won't look exactly like that. The second most common reason people want chameleons is that they want something unique, something that makes them stand out as a pet owner. And look, I understand that impulse, but wanting something cool is not sufficient motivation to take on what is genuinely one of the most challenging reptiles to keep in captivity. If your primary motivation is aesthetics or novelty, you will almost certainly lose interest once the daily reality of chameleon care sets in. And that's when chameleons end up rehomed, neglected, or surrendered to rescues that are already overwhelmed. Now, after all of that, I want to be very clear about something. I am not saying nobody should keep chameleons. There are thousands of dedicated keepers around the world who provide phenomenal care for their chameleons and who find the challenge deeply rewarding.
These are people who genuinely enjoy the research, the monitoring, the constant fine-tuning of their setup. They find satisfaction in creating a thriving mini ecosystem. They accept that their chameleon is mostly a look but don't touch animal, and they're perfectly happy with that dynamic. They have the financial resources to provide proper equipment and veterinary care, and they went into it with realistic expectations. If that sounds like you, if you've watched this entire video and you're thinking, yeah, I know all of that and I still want one, then honestly, you might be the right person for a chameleon. My advice would be to join some online chameleon communities first. Spend 3 to 6 months just reading, learning, and asking questions before you buy anything. Build your enclosure before you get the animal so you can make sure everything is stable and dialed in. Find an exotic vet in your area before you need one, because trying to find a qualified reptile vet at 9 o'clock on a Saturday night when your chameleon is gasping for air is not a situation you want to be in. And please buy from a reputable captive breeder. A healthy, well-started captive-bred chameleon from a breeder who knows their bloodlines is worlds apart from a stressed, possibly parasitized animal sitting under a heat lamp at a chain pet store. But if anything I've said today gave you pause, if the cost made you wince, if the idea of not handling your pet regularly disappoints you, if the daily husbandry sounds exhausting rather than exciting, if the shorter lifespan concerns you, if you realize you can't house them together, if the travel problem worries you, or if your motivation is mostly about how cool they look, then please, for the chameleon's sake and for your own, consider a different reptile. There are so many incredible reptiles out there that are far more suitable for the average keeper. Crested geckos are gorgeous, easy to care for, handleable, and can live 15 to 20 years. Blue-tongued skinks are personable, hardy, and actually seem to enjoy human interaction. Corn snakes are beautiful, low maintenance, and absolutely perfect for beginners who want a stunning animal without the steep learning curve. Even a bearded dragon, which does require a decent setup, is miles easier to care for than a chameleon and actually seems to enjoy interacting with their owner. The reptile hobby is big enough and diverse enough that there truly is a perfect species for everyone. You just have to be honest with yourself about what you actually want from the experience and what you're realistically able to provide. And that kind of honesty isn't weakness, it's the mark of a responsible keeper. So, there you have it, 7 reasons to seriously think twice before getting a chameleon. The cost is substantial and ongoing. They don't want to be handled. The husbandry is demanding and unforgiving. They must live alone. Their lifespans are shorter than you'd expect. You can't easily leave them when you travel, and most people want them for reasons that won't sustain the level of commitment required. If this video helped you, whether it changed your mind or simply confirmed a decision you were already leaning toward, do me a favor and hit that like button. It really does help more people find this kind of honest content, and in a space full of top 10 coolest pets videos that gloss over the reality, I think we need more honest conversations like this one. If you're new here and you want more real talk about reptile and pet care that doesn't sugarcoat anything, go ahead and subscribe. I've got a lot more content like this coming. And if you're curious about which reptile might actually be the perfect fit for your lifestyle, your budget, and your expectations, I've got a video right over here that breaks down the best beginner reptiles and what to genuinely expect from each one. I'll see you in that